everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040, and today I wanted to discuss and share my thoughts with all of you about a significant moment that took place in Arrow during the show's fourth season, and it's a moment that still gets talked about a lot to this day, exactly a decade later, and it's a moment that gets talked about a lot very negatively among fans, and myself included. And it's a moment that I still consider to be the biggest mistake ever for Arrow. And that was when Laurel Lance got killed off. So, around the time I was getting into Arrow, thanks in part to the Flash crossovers, I loved season one. Season two, absolutely the best season ever, thanks largely in part to Manu Bennett's badass performance as Deathstroke. Just an unbelievable season. That to me was when Arrow really peaked, as far as I'm concerned. You had season three, which was pretty good, although the whole Ra's al Ghul stuff thing was a little bit weird for my liking, but it was still a pretty good, enjoyable season. Now, you get to season four, and a lot of people have always said that season four was the worst season ever, and a lot of people have always looked at season four as the beginning of the end for the show. Now, I've talked about the Arrowverse quite a lot in the past, and I've always referred to each show's season as the season four curse because you would have a show where the first two, sometimes three seasons are really good, and then you get to four, and the whole thing just goes completely off the cliff. Supergirl for me was the one that broke the season four curse because they came through and delivered what I would still say to this day as the show's best season ever. They are the only show to have achieved that. Now, the big problem for a lot of fans regarding Arrow season four was when they killed off Laurel Lance. Now, for those of you who remember, Laurel Lance was killed by Damien Dark with an arrow during a massive prison riot. This is where Damien Dark was attempting to break everybody out of prison, and Team Arrow, Oliver, Diggle, Thea, and Laurel, they were all there trying to stop Damien Dark from causing this massive prison riot. Now, when Laurel Lance got killed off, I won't lie, it was a shocking moment because, you know, Laurel Lance getting killed off the way she did was quite big. But in all honesty, when I look back at it, it is still a big, shocking moment, but I don't really feel it was as big a moment as, the show made it out to be. Was it big? Yes. Was it a huge deal? Not as much. Now, if someone like Diggle got killed off, then we would be having a very different story because I feel that with Laurel Lance getting killed off, there was no need. There honestly was no need to kill her off. I know why they did it because they wanted her out of the way so they could push the whole Oliver and Felicity romance when everybody knows in the comic books, depending on what continuity you read, 95% of the time, Green Arrow and Black Canary, they end up being the iconic couple and getting married, which they did a big story arc in the comic books many years ago. So I appreciate the fact that it's a different universe, it's a different continuity, but really and truly, there was no need to kill off Laurel Lance. Now, what they could have done is maybe after they defeat Damien Dark and all that stuff, maybe Laurel Lance could have walked away and they could have kept the door open for her to come back for various episodes as a recurring character. But to kill her off was just so stupid. And really and truly, I've got nothing against Katie Cassidy. She's a fine actress, but I feel that the overall impact of Laurel's death was a big deal, but it wasn't a big deal as much as the show pushed it to be. They tried to put it on the same level as Jason Todd's death in Batman Death in the Family. Not even close. Not even in the same league. Jason Todd's death in Death in the Family was a massive deal because that was deemed as Batman's greatest failure. Now, with Laurel's death, they milked it. They really milked this one rotten. I think if you took the carton of milk and just shake it out, they got every last bit of juice out of that carton with Laurel Lance's death. And here's where things get more silly. She came back as Black Siren, who was a doppelganger of Laurel Lance, and then you had the whole redemption story up with Laurel's dad and all that. It was fine, but then you have to ask yourself, well, why did you kill her off in the first place? It just made no sense, because killing off Laurel Lance, to a lot of fans, the show was never the same, because after she died, the show started to decline, which it depends on who you ask, really, because I felt that the show picked itself back up in a big way with season 5. I thought that was a fantastic season with the whole Prometheus slash Adrian Chase. Tremendous stuff. Season 6, I thought was terrible, but did have good episodes. Season 7, I think the first 5 or 6 episodes where Oliver was in prison, excellent stuff. But the rest of it, not so much. Season 8 was pretty good. Bit short, but was pretty good. But I really felt that Laurel Lance getting killed off was the biggest mistake ever for Arrow. They shouldn't have done it. They should have kept her alive. And maybe they should have pushed the whole Green Arrow and Black Canary romance, which we all know is iconic in animation and comic books. But they just wanted to have her out of the way for more Felicity Smoke. Don't get me wrong, I love Felicity Smoke, but I felt that story arc played itself out round about season 3. I think maybe they could have ended it there and moved on fully with Laurel Lance. But it is what it is. They killed her off. Biggest mistake ever. She was a popular character, but I don't think the impact Laurel's death had, I don't think it had the impact that they were hoping for because it wasn't like it did much for the story. Because, you know, I did a separate video years earlier with Rex Boss 11 where we talked about the success and failures of Arrow, and one of the biggest failures was killing off Laurel Lance. I just don't think it served much purpose. And then, as I said, they brought Casey Cassidy back, although a different version of Laurel Lance, but just didn't really serve much purpose, to be honest. Was it a big moment? Definitely. It's a very big moment. Was it a game changer? No, absolutely not. Definitely not. Now, had they killed off Felicity Smoke instead, would that have been a big deal? Probably, in a different way. But yeah, as I said, 10 years later, you know, Laurel Lance's death remains the biggest mistake ever for Arrow, and quite frankly, they did pick themselves back up again, as I said earlier, with season 5, but I don't think they fully were able to move on from the backlash that Laurel Lance's death received. I just don't think it did a lot of favours for the show. But in all honesty, I just didn't think it was that much of a big deal. It was a big mistake, but it wasn't much of a big deal. Not the way they bashed it over our heads every chance they had. But that's just how I feel, really. So, anyway, that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on Arrow killing off Laurel Lance? Do you think it was the right call to make? Do you think it was a big mistake? And do you think they should have kept her alive? And also, was it a big deal for you? Did it make much of an impact? And do you think that Laurel Lance's death was the start of the decline for Arrow? Do you think that maybe this was the beginning of the end? And also, if you had kept Laurel Lance alive, would you have pushed the romance between her and Oliver to be the iconic couple that we all know from the comic books and in animation? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.